On our broadcast this Friday night, the two Koreas sitting down for rare high-level talks today, with each side looking to squeeze concessions from the other on stalled cross-border programs, among others. Finally, some outcome. Seoul and Tokyo will hold another working-level talks in Tokyo next week, the 11th of its kind, to take another aim at resolving the issue of Japan's sexual enslavement of women before and during World War II. And plunging oil prices are taking a toll on Korea's import-export prices. The nation's export price index stands at a near 30-year low. NEWSCENTER begins right now. Good evening to our viewers in Korea, and hello to those around the world. This is NEWSCENTER. The two Koreas are in high-level talks this Friday night, the first of its kind since 2007. Now, that in efforts to improve cross-border relations and spur more exchanges between South and North Korea. Well, not only is it the first in 8 years, it's the first such meeting since President Park Geun-hye took office early 2013. Government officials from Seoul and Pyongyang kicked off their talks earlier this morning and are ongoing as we speak, meaning our correspondent Song Ji-sun has been on standby for quite some time now at the Inter-Korean Dialogue headquarters in Seoul. Now, Ji-sun, it's been a long day for you, which could turn into an even longer night. How are the talks proceeding at the Kaesong Industrial Complex?
Good evening, Ganya. We're definitely looking into a very long night, and we just got this from the headquarters that the third round of talks have just begun at 9:40 p.m. there and on Seoul time. Now, this is following the second session, which only the chief delegates attended, and that second session resumed 7 hours after the first session, which ended in the morning at 11:10 a.m. Now, this means that it took them just as long to return to the table for negotiation for the second and the third round. And after the 30-minute plenary session in the morning, this evening session, the second one, lasted for slightly more than an hour and ended at 7:15 p.m. Seoul time. South Korea's Unification Ministry did not elaborate on how many or which agenda items were mentioned in their keynote remarks or the second session. But Seoul's top priority has always been on holding regular reunions for war-separated families, with over 66,000 people still on the wait list to get the chance of seeing their families after 6 decades since the Korean War. Pyongyang is most likely to ask for the resumption of tours to its Mount Kumgang resort as a precondition to that. Those tours were suspended in 2008 after a South Korean tourist was shot dead by a North Korean soldier. Now, regarding this issue, Seoul demands Pyongyang guarantee the safety of South Koreans if the tours are to resume. And it will be very difficult for the two sides to narrow their differences during this initial round, with a high chance it is also reality now that this talks will stretch into the night. Kanyang.
Right, well, I suppose we can take comfort in the fact that the talks are on track at least. Now, early this morning, there were news that the mood between the two representatives were quite friendly during the opening session. I know it's hard to say, but can we expect some concrete results either later tonight or, as you said, possibly tomorrow morning?
Right, there has been very little delay between the sessions when it started, and we also saw a very rare move by Pyongyang. The North delegation greeted the South at its border, which was a very courteous and, like I said, very rare move by Pyongyang. And of course, the opening plenary session was held on a very positive vibes, because their opening session was very friendly from both sides. The talks got off to a good start with a North high-level official for its unification agency, Jeon Jong-soo, who opened his keynote by saying that although it is winter now on the Korean peninsula, spring should arrive for the two Koreas through continued efforts. And for that, South Korea's Vice Unification Minister Hwang Buk-il responded by saying, "Let us make the right first step."
There hasn't been a true dialogue between the two Koreas. Distrust and confrontation has resulted in a barrier. We need to dismantle that obstacle and open a new path.
It's important that we make the right move for this first step. Let us pave the road to reunification and refrain from straying off the path in this initial round of talks.
Now, although there are some issues, very difficult ones, like resuming the tours on Mount Kumgang, there are also some lighter matters that both sides are approaching rather at ease. For example, expanding exchanges in culture, sports, and on humanitarian grounds. And this initial round could be rated as a success if the two sides agree to hold on these talks on a regular basis on how many times and when to take the next round. And I will be sure to keep you updated throughout the night. Kanyang.
And I'm sure you will. Thank you, Jisun, for that. That was our Song Jisun live from the Inter-Korean Dialogue headquarters in Seoul. It's not typical for human rights to top the discussions table at the UN Security Council, but since last year, the UNSC's debate on North Korea has expanded to include the reclusive state's atrocious human rights situation. That was the case this year as well, as the UN General Assembly urged the Council to consider referring North Korea to the International Criminal Court after a UN Commission of Inquiry detailed wide-ranging abuses in the hermit state. Permanent members China and Russia were against it to no avail. Arirang News Kwon-soa reports.
Because the North Korean people continue to endure a, quote, real-life nightmare, is why the UN Security Council met on North Korea's human rights issues on Human Rights Day. That's what the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, who chaired Thursday's meeting, said as the 15 members of the council gathered to discuss the issue for the first time since it was officially added to the agenda last year.
Efforts to engage the government of the DPRK to improve the human rights situation in the country must go hand in hand with efforts to hold perpetrators of crimes accountable.
9 members, including 3 of the 5 permanent members, the United States, Britain, and France, voted for the topic to be discussed, while the 2 other permanent members, China, North Korea's firm ally, and Russia voted against it, along with Venezuela and Angola. 2 abstained. The Chinese representative at the meeting reiterated China's stance on the issue.
China is always opposed to the Security Council's intervention in issues concerning a specific country's human rights. The Security Council is not the place to address human rights.
But the majority of the council and experts here in Seoul believe Pyongyang's human rights crimes have wider implications and pose a threat to the international community.
It's essential to remind the international society of the seriousness of North Korean human rights issues and the need for improvement. Although there will be no use of force, the UN Security Council is trying to push North Korea in an indirect manner.
Although not a member of the council, South Korea's ambassador to the UN, Oh Jun, attended the meeting. He said despite last year's landmark resolution passed at the UN General Assembly calling for North Korea to be referred to the International Criminal Court over alleged human violations, nothing has really changed in the North since then. Kwon-soa, Arirang News.
Well, maybe not its human rights situation, but North Korea is definitely going through significant changes. Pyongyang's state-run news agency reports the state's first banking conference in 25 years will take place. Our Connie Kim has more on the latest indicator that the regime's looking to overhaul its flagging financial system.
Is North Korea feeling the need for an overall restructure of its financial system to coincide with economic development? The Korea Central News Agency reported on Thursday that panels of the Financial Bank Conference paid their respects to the late leaders Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung at the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun, suggesting the opening of the conference is nearing. The convention will gather representatives from the banking sector to discuss the regime's financial system. The exact date, location, and size of the conference have not been announced, but it will be the first in 25 years and the first under Kim Jong-un's rule. The re-establishment of North Korea's financial system is inevitable, experts say, with North Korea's economy expanding, especially under the young leader's reign.
Exchanges with China, giving incentives to farms to produce more, and allowing more autonomy to small companies have led to improvement in the regime's economy.
Looking at the figures, North Korea logged an economic growth rate of below 1% in 2011, and the number stood in the 1% range in the following years since Kim's inauguration. Adding weight to the argument that Pyongyang needs improved banking systems, 80% of North Koreans are reported to engage in economic activities through buying and selling at markets under the regime.
Analysts in Seoul also suggest the conference is part of Pyongyang's economic development plan to establish a firm financial base for building infrastructure after a rare party congress in May. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Government representatives from Korea and Japan will meet next week for another round of talks to try and resolve the issue of Japan's wartime sex slavery system. President Park Geun-hye has vowed that some kind of significant outcome on the issue will be reached by the end of the year. Now, make note that we have roughly 3 weeks left until the year's over. Kwon Jang-ho has this report.
Korea's foreign ministry announced on Friday that Korea and Japan will hold another round of working-level talks next week. It's the 11th session since the first was held in April last year. Korea's Northeast Asian Bureau Chief Lee Sang-duk will sit down with his counterpart Kimihiro Ishikane in Tokyo on Tuesday. Seoul is demanding a formal apology and compensation for the victims exploited by the Japanese military during World War II. But Tokyo claims its legal obligation was settled in a 1965 agreement that normalized relations between the two countries. It's estimated that roughly 200,000 women from across Asia, but mostly from Korea, served as sex slaves for Japanese soldiers. It will be the second round of talks to take place since the Korean President Park Geun-hye met her Japanese counterpart, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, at a summit last month and agreed to speed up a resolution on the matter. President Park has since said she will push for an outcome by the end of the year, but Prime Minister Abe has been less committed.
Rather than reaching an agreement, this occasion is also likely to be more about narrowing their differences. Both sides have their respective stances, and I really don't think it will be easy for an outcome to be reached within this year.
And time is simply running out, not for the two governments, but for the victims themselves. Last week, Che Gap-sun, one of the Korean women who was forced into sexual slavery by colonial Japan, passed away. It was the 9th funeral for a victim this year. Only 46 known survivors are left today. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Plunging oil prices are taking a toll on Korea's import and export prices. Data released by the nation's central bank shows the export-reliant economy's outbound shipment prices dipped to the lowest level in decades, primarily due to super low global oil prices. Our Kim Ji-yeon has this report.
Korea's export prices fell to its lowest level in nearly 30 years, largely due to the aftermath of falling international oil prices. This means the price of commodities sold by local exporters are at the same level as they were some 30 years ago. Data from the Bank of Korea show the export price index, an indicator of export prices, plunged 15.6% last month from the same period last year, the lowest since it was recorded in September 1989. In particular, raw materials fell nearly 5% from the previous month, prompting a drop in prices of home appliances, coal, and petroleum products. The Bank of Korea attributed the decline in export prices to the plunge in price of Dubai crude oil, which accounts for some 80% of Korea's total oil imports. The central bank says the average price of Dubai crude fell 46% in November from the same period last year to around $42 per barrel. A researcher from the Korea Economic Research Institute, Choi Nam-seok, says it's still premature to say for sure whether the drop in export prices will benefit or harm the local economy. But in theory, he says falling export prices is generally not welcome news for Korea, a country which relies heavily on exports for growth, since exporters would see their profits shrink. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Ballooning household debt has always been an issue for Korea, but it's raising more alarm bells than ever. Closer monitoring of debt levels atop the discussions at an international conference co-hosted by Korea's central bank and the International Monetary Fund. The details of the meeting, our Shin Se-min reports.
The Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol says that the country's rising debt levels should be closely monitored, especially when the global economic uncertainties are mounting. Speaking at the BOK-IMF International Conference on Friday, the central banker called for caution ahead of an imminent U.S. rate hike. saying that if one economy employs excessive leverage, it'll then cause other economies to shoulder the burden, putting restrictions on spending and investment. Korea's household debt, considered a potential time bomb, is already nearing the $1 trillion mark on the back of government-driven measures to boost the property market and a record-low interest rate of 1.5%. These conditions are now becoming a serious liability for the country's long-term economic well-being. The BOK governor also pointed at looming uncertainties as the U.S. Federal Reserve is expected to raise its benchmark rate to return its monetary policy to a normal track. He urged financial institutions to tighten loan screening systems to improve leverage and prepare themselves for changes on the financial stage while securing capital with greater stability. For borrowers, the governor said people should better manage their pocketbooks in the face of potential fluctuations in income or bank interest rates. And to tackle such issues, an IMF economist urged the Korean government to bring down credit vulnerability through fiscal and monetary policies in preparation for a possible credit crunch. 신세민, Arirang News.
Japan has coined the term Abenomics, India Modinomics, in Korea the Choinomics. Well, the term Choinomics is nearing its exit from the Korean lexicon as a third partial cabinet reshuffle is set to take place very soon. What is Choinomics and was it a success or a failure? Our Hwang Ji-hye has an analysis of Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan's past policies as well as the challenges that lie ahead for his successor.
Since July last year, when Choi Kyung-hwan was sworn in as the finance minister, much of the focus was on boosting sluggish recovery that was back then hit hard by the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. In response, Choi devised a $40 billion stimulus package and eased regulations to prop up the real estate market. The loan-to-value and debt-to-income ratios were eased, allowing homebuyers to borrow up to 70% of their property value and 60% of their income for mortgage payments. This measure gave a big boost to the real estate market. A year before his term, apartment transactions stood at around 75,000 cases in Seoul, but a year later, that number shot up to over 110,000. But the measures triggered a snowballing household debt problem that's now cited as a huge obstacle for the next minister. Many consider it a major potential risk in the face of a rate hike widely expected in the U.S. And while Choi was quite successful in boosting recovery momentum and putting the economy back on track, many believe that he failed to properly address structural issues, which will also represent a challenge for the next leader of the economy.
The next finance minister will have to complete the structural reforms in the four sectors, putting extra emphasis on the labor sector. The new leader should also find ways to breathe new life into sluggish exports that have been the main reason behind this year's slower-than-expected growth.
Experts add that the new finance minister faces a tough year ahead with economic conditions abroad worsening, not just with the slowing Chinese economy, but also with low global oil prices. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Now, more public corporations in Korea are adopting the government's National Competency Standard, or the NCS system, to hire new employees. 130 corporations utilized the NCS system this year, and now private companies are beginning to implement the system as well. However, for college students who have gotten used to the grades and the languages and really which schools you went to, are having a hard time adapting to these sudden changes. Oh Soo-young has the details.
For Korean job seekers, the word spec means everything. Spec refers to certifications in foreign languages, special skill sets, a high GPA and work experience. It's basically anything that can be added to your resume to gain that competitive edge. Job requirements differ from company to company depending on the positions. And that's why university students make strenuous efforts to fulfill as many qualifications as possible, spending on average around $36,000 and exhausting over $100,000 in opportunity costs. To overhaul such inefficiencies, the Korean government has enforced the implementation of a hiring system called the National Competency Standard, or NCS, across 130 public companies this year. NCS is comprised of a general application, standardized test and an interview, with each process specifying the required skill sets and qualifications for 857 occupations.
NCS is expected to reduce time and socioeconomic costs as it gives job applicants a clear understanding of what skill sets and requirements are needed. Also, it will help companies save costs on employee training.
The NCS will expand to 230 public corporations next year, as well as private companies. However, many students are finding these changes difficult to adapt to.
The public enterprises require more specialized knowledge, and as a liberal arts major, I kind of felt burdensome to study for those special words.
A survey revealed that more than 50% found preparing for NCS standards burdensome. And experts say helping students transition to this new process may take some time.
Adapting to this system took 100 years in Europe and 30 years in Australia. In Korea, the system was expanded too quickly, and developing application models takes time.
In the long run, the government will continue to enhance the new hiring system, along with a complementary scheme called the Work and Learning Dual System. This will create coordination between companies and educational institutions, so students can gain practical knowledge and skills relevant to their desired jobs. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Earlier this month, Henrik DIRKS won the Daesan Literary Award for Translation for his work in translating Korean literature Jeong-young-moon's Vaseline Buddha into German. Now, the Daesan Literary Award is one of the most prestigious literary awards in Korea, and Henrik DIRKS joins me in the studio today for In Person this week. Jan, it's great to have you here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, this translation, your work was described as a flowing translation of high literacy and introducing or announcing a third generation of translators.
Which is a shameless exaggeration, but okay, I'll accept it.
Yes, and you deserve that. And it's this book that it is, right? This is the Korean version, and this is the German translation.
Exactly.
Now, before we get into this book, though, I'd like to ask you how you first got into translating Korean literature.
About 5 years ago, I started to work at the Literature Translation Institute here in Seoul, LTI, and I was to help the students to improve the readability and the linguistic precision of their translations. And that's how I got into translation myself. When I got to know Vaseline Buddha by Jeong-young-moon, I decided to do my own translation project for the first time.
What was it about this book? What was it about this Jeong-young-moon's Vaseline Buddha that really inspired you and motivated you to translate this?
Actually, this novel is a quite extraordinary piece of literature, I think. It's an endless flow of thoughts and memories, mostly about trips to foreign countries, many little episodes of incidental occurrences which seem to be absolutely insignificant, but which become meaningful exactly because of their meaninglessness. That's something I found very appealing, and so I decided to translate it.
Wow, meaningful because of its meaninglessness. That's some high thought. What are some of the particular joys and challenges in translating Korean literature? We often, say we don't want to get things lost in translation.
Well, one of the challenges I had to face when doing this translation was, for example, the syntactical structure. In Korean, the verb, the most important part of the sentence, normally is at the end of the sentence. In German, similar to English, it's at the beginning. And so you have to find ways to deal with that without breaking the tension of the sentence.
Why don't you share with us one of your favorite phrases or clauses, both in Chung Young-moon's original piece, Vaseline Buddha, and into your own translation into German. And of course, for us, please translate that into English as well.
Yes. I think I won't choose my favorite sentence because it will take too much time. But I will take one sentence which explains the intention of the author very clearly. It's at the beginning of the novel. There it is. 그리고 이것은 읽기자 자전소설인 그것들이 뒤썩은 것으로 뭐라고 이름 붙이기 어려운 글이 될 수도 또는 그 무엇도 아닌 것 또는 그 무엇도 아닌 어떤 것도 아닌 것이 될 수도 있을 것이다. I'll read it in English now. This could become a story which is at the same time a diary and an autobiographical novel, an indefinable combination of both, or nothing of that kind, or something that is not even anything, or something that is not even not anything. So that's his definition of his work, and it's exactly this hyper-precision which has to be maintained in order to convey the fuzziness of this text. That's what I found interesting. To be hyper-precise means to become fuzzy at another level.
Well, so you have received an award for this work, and have you started translating other Korean literature pieces? Well, what are your plans from here on forth?
Yes, I decided to stick for a while to Chung Young-moon. I've translated another novel which is called 어떤 자기의 세계. In English that would be A Contrived World, and also 목신의 어떤 오후, The Afternoon of the Fawn. And at the moment I'm translating a novel by Pae Sua, which is called The Low Hills of Seoul, 서울은 낮은 언덕들.
Well, Jan DIRKS, I wish you the best of luck in your next endeavors, and I hope to see more and more of Korean literature being translated into German for the German readers so that we can better introduce Korean literature to other countries as well. Thank you so much for coming in today.
My pleasure.
Climate talks in Paris will run past Friday's deadline as delegates try to forge a stronger deal to curb global warming. Bruce Harrison joins me live in the studio. Bruce, what is delaying the conclusion of the talks?
Hello, Kang-young. A climate conference president, Laurent Fabius, said it's likely going to be until midday Saturday until they can overcome some major disputes and pass a deal, namely differing expectations for rich and poor countries, long-term goals to limit emissions, and how to finance all these very ambitious goals.
Well, Bruce, those are some major sticking points. Now, how confident are the leaders there that they'll be able to narrow their differences and really come up with an effective solution?
Well, before Fabius announced they were going past the deadline, he said it was going to take into the wee hours to reach a deal, mainly because of those issues, differentiation among the rich and poor, financing, and ambition. Now, despite that, he seems confident they will pass the deal they want, though it's apparently going to be a package forced through at the last minute. Conference organizers view the delays as positive, though, a contrast to setbacks at the Copenhagen Climate Conference in 2009.
In Copenhagen, the delays were about trying to rescue something that was going wrong. Here it's about trying to improve something that's going right.
Annual UN climate meetings typically run into overtime, though this year's announcement of delays just of the deadline was rather abrupt. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has said there'll be a climate catastrophe if efforts aren't made to check carbon emissions. The Swiss city of Geneva is on high alert amid suspected terrorist activity. According to CNN, police were looking for 5 people suspected to be part of a terrorist network involved in the Paris attacks. The broadcaster reports the men could be linked to Murad Fares, who recruited one of the men who attacked the Bataclan Theater in Paris. Swiss authorities raised the city's terror alert as a precaution, and authorities said it's unclear if these people are currently in Switzerland. A local newspaper reported a suspicious car had been spotted in Geneva along the border before it crossed into France.
But I can assure you that our management of the French-Swiss border is very tight. We see everyone who comes in and out.
Swiss and French officials say they've been working closely since the deadly attacks in Paris that killed 130 people.
Now, Bruce, December 12th, 2015 will be a date to remember in the history books of Saudi Arabia. For the first time, women will vote and seek public office. So how did these elections come about?
Well, they faced some strong opposition from the deeply embedded religious community there, but organizers, according to the Wall Street Journal, let me take a step back there. Critics say it's only to boost foreign consumption. That's the election. But election organizers say it's an important step nonetheless, and they're optimistic about the outcome.
Actually, there is a large turnout of women candidates, and this shows that we will see some of them as members of municipal councils. It's something that is very likely.
130,000 women have registered to vote in the elections, about 24% of all people registered.
Well, Saudi Arabia is the only country to bar women from driving, and they must have a male guardian or custodian at all times. Otherwise, they can be stopped from traveling, from marrying, working, or having any kind of medical procedures done.
That's correct. And some people say those are just the surface oppressive acts that take place against women in Saudi Arabia, that the oppression actually trickles down into much smaller, subtle areas that the outside world doesn't see. But even if the outside world views this as only a baby step for the women in Saudi Arabia, it's definitely a large step towards more suffrage and rights for women in that country.
Right. Definitely a landmark, I suppose, landmark elections and a date to remember for women in Saudi Arabia. Thank you, Bruce, for that, for today as well as for all of this week, and we'll see you on Monday.
Thanks. See you next week.
Well, it was certainly a pleasant day today. Hard to say that we're in December, but I'm sure that many in the country are looking forward to similar conditions over the weekend. It'll be great for some outside time. Let's go over to our Jihan for more details. Jihan.
Hello there, Kanyang. Yes, we had a late autumn-like feeling today, and I'm so glad to tell you that we can start making plans as the whole nation will continue enjoying the current pleasant weather conditions during the weekend, with highs getting up to 9 degrees Celsius here in the capital, both on Saturday and Sunday under bright skies. So on that note, let's move on to tomorrow's temperature readings, but checking on the lows first. It's going to be colder than today, about 5 degrees lower, as here in Seoul will kick off at 0. Daesan will also start out at 0 as well, and Daegu will wake up to a low of 1, while Busan should start out the day at 6 and 9 for Jeju Island. And afternoon highs will be similar to a tad lower than today, as the capital here in the capital will peak at 9. Daesan and Daegu will see a high of 11 and 12, while Busan and Gwangju will peak at 13 and 12 is the highest temperature for Jeju Island. Now readings will stay above the averages till early next week. Then rain on Tuesday will bring down the highs to the below seasonal averages, so enjoy the mild conditions while it's here. And before I go, a quick announcement for drivers taking the Seoul Station overpass. The overpass will be shutting down from this Sunday at midnight for safety reasons. So drivers are advised to take alternate roads to avoid unnecessary and unpleasant traffic congestions. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
Well, what do we know? We all thought Santa Claus was from the North Pole. Well, apparently not. That is our broadcast on this Friday night. I'm Moon Gan-young. Thanks to everyone for watching. Have a wonderful weekend, and we hope to see you right back here, same time Monday on NEWSCENTER.
Thank you.